now, for the feedback, Professor Fanzo, who's had the opportunity to follow the work of the committee quite closely.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So we had a small group, but I think it was a fun group. The food group's always fun. But it's also dealing with a really intractable, difficult issue, but I think we found a way to make the challenge a bit more tractable. So Andre gave you some of the statistics already. 750 million people go hungry or food insecure. 160 million children are stunted, short for their age. I'm short, am I stunted? Not really, well, maybe. But it's not only being stunted in your body, but more importantly in your brain. And cognitive development impedes the progress of nations, and you see this all over. 160 million, that might not seem a lot, but that's actually 20% of the world's children under 5 years of age. It's a massive burden. It takes generations to get over stunting. 2.2 billion people are overweight or obese. That is a huge, huge burden. Again, economically very costly. You could argue that, well, that leads to about 3.5 billion people have a malnutrition issue. And the other half of the world is doing well. Some people argue for that. But we know that not one country has been able to stop the trends that we're seeing in obesity. Everyone is following the United States, where we have 60% of our country is overweight or obese. Mexico, 75% of women of reproductive age are obese. That's insane. And with climate change and other serious planetary triggers, the gains that we have seen in reducing stunting and child mortality will most likely be lost. Over the next 20 years, these multiple forms of malnutrition will pose increasingly serious threats to global health and the area that I work on, global security. As Bob Marley said, a hungry man is an angry man, and that is very true. You often see in food insecure areas, social unrest, and serious conflict. Population growth combined with climate change will place increasing stress on food systems, particularly for Africa and Asia, where there'll be an additional 2 billion people by 2050. At the same time, we have rapidly increasing urbanization, particularly in those two regions, and this will affect hunger and nutrition in very complicated ways, sometimes positive and sometimes negative. We have a moral obligation, all of us in the room do. Policymakers, industry, corporations need to act decisively to help in this burden in controlling overweight, obesity, and diet-related diseases, and accelerate efforts to reduce undernutrition. All countries will pay a very heavy price in terms of mortality, physical health, mental well-being, economic losses, and degradation in the environment if we don't act. So where to start? All these burdens are very complicated. They're very biologically complicated outcomes and requires a lot of different sectors. But the food sector is a really important contributor to the burden, but it also is chock full of solutions that need to be scaled. Agriculture is the foundation of our food system, and it's what feeds us. Many of the farmers in the world are poor, and they need support against some of these drivers like climate change, rural flee. I was just talking to a colleague of mine in Nepal. Everyone's moving to Qatar. They're leaving agriculture to go work in building the soccer stadium for the next World Cup. They need support to be able to continue to produce food and feed us. As Alain Vidal said, climate-smart agriculture is the key to helping farmers adapt to the changes that they face, which are very stark. Agriculture, though, is traditionally focused on increasing yields of 3 major crops: maize, rice, and wheat, and they've done really well in rising to the challenge to feed the 9 billion people. You keep hearing that. Well, we don't need to just feed people like we're cattle in a trough. We need to feed people well. We don't want to just keep people alive, we want them to thrive. There's a big difference. Today's food systems are too focused on food quantity and not enough on quality of diets, and they're not really helping with consumers to make healthy and affordable food choices for better nutrition outcomes. The trend is actually in the opposite direction. Many would say that our food system is completely broken right now. Diets are one of these central pivots that the food system can focus on. Right now, our diets, we're consuming too much. US, we consume about 4,000 calories a day. I need about 1,200 calories a day. They're poor quality, they're very expensive for a lot of the world, and they're not sustainable. A lot of demand for red meat. China, huge demand for red meat. Very difficult for the planet to sustain that. Diets are not nutritious, they're often not safe, and they're now the #1 risk factor for global burden of disease. They surpass alcohol, and everyone was partaking last night. They surpass tobacco, motor accidents, everything. Diet is the #1 risk of death globally, right? And what are these diets? Heavy in what? Sugar, salt, and fat. Industry knows this, we love it, they provide it. The risk of poor diets pose more mortality and morbidity is really a huge burden. We also know that heavy resource diets take a huge toll on planetary health. The multiple forms of malnutrition will not diminish unless policymakers, private sector, business leaders work together to reshape food systems in a way that will advance better diets for everybody. We need to ensure that all parts of the food system work together, that Andre presented, to deliver better quality diets. That doesn't mean just agriculture. It also means better processing, better movement of food across countries, across oceans, better trade, less perverse policies of subsidies. We need to talk about the GMO issue. It's a big issue. It's the elephant in the room. We need better storage of foods, better retailing, marketing, more ethical advertising. Don't market junk food to children. This is a very obvious thing. Consumer knowledge and behavior is key. The choices that consumers make, whether limited or plentiful, as Andre had said, matter not only for the individual, but being that we are living in a very globalized world, our choices matter for others. Does man or woman have the right to eat wrongly? Do we have the right to eat red meat at every meal? It's a question. Will others and the planet pay the price for our poor diets? The answer is yes. The evidence suggests yes. And who will suffer? The most vulnerable. But we cannot just leave it in the hands of the consumers and hope they make the right choices when it comes time to their diet. Social inequities in where and how we live limit our ability to shape our own lives. I lived part of my time in Baltimore. Some of you may have been watching Baltimore in the news. It's a city that's on its knees from racial inequity. Most people in Baltimore shop for their food in a bulletproof liquor store. That's where they get their food. That is poverty, ladies and gentlemen, in America. Incarceration, gun violence, poor food environments. This is everywhere. Behaviors of the state, the food and beverage industry, corporations, tech industry, everyone in this room matter. Behavior matters. It's not just consumers. Everyone eats, everyone has a role to play, and we have a social contract to help feed those who can't help themselves, particularly the most vulnerable, like women and children. Food touches all of us every day, sometimes 3 times a day. It's very linked to the energy sector. So I encourage you all to think about the role that you play, not only as an individual, because we're all interested in food, hopefully, but in where and how you work. Thank you.